Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Mini Proposal Workshop. And today we are going to work on a new problem and solution statements. So let's come down to actual business, which is doing the problem ideation. So I tracked, copy pasted some sticky notes on here, small whiteboard, which are around this community collaboration. And these are mostly the highlighted sticky notes. I deleted all the ones which didn't get any votes or were too far away from kind of connection, as you can see from this edge. And use these and basically go through these white sticky notes and basically all of these and see if, and basically ask ourselves what problems these directions solve. And then we kind of list all of these things and we have a motherboard vote. I think we are now used to that, and see where our energy overlaps. And then basically use that for root causing, analyzing, and yeah, the rest. So let's start from these small ones, and let's, I guess, yeah, I don't know. I guess we need to start from closest to community collaboration. Perhaps most makes sense, because the further we hop, the less it may get relevant. So raising issues of the AI. If we do this, we start raising issues about AI and create workshops around them and documentation and guides. What kind of problems we are solving with this?
Tivo, do you mean having AI surface the issues, or what issues with the AI industry?
So I think both. We could go, yeah, if we wonder, if we go again to entire industry, could we fall in trap of creating again too big of a solution?
Yes, definitely. I think yeah.
But we could start from there, because we may get up a problem statement and knowing
Okay.
and because it's going to be in a selection, if we for now we just need to ideate. So I think let's add everything, both infrastructure like entire AI, but also scope down versions if we come up with any. And right now we're actually looking for problems. So raising issue of an AI means that there is if you turn that into problem, there is a concern.
Okay. I was kind of trying to put some ideas together last night about the industries and some of the issues, and potentially AI. Is there's a lot of open source solutions out there. They get forked, there's never any contribution back to the original creator. I don't see that pipeline. And so I'm trying to address how we can leverage multiple open source code repos, build this dashboard with them, and then have the larger community contribute, the developer community contribute back, and have that trickle back into the source repos, and creating a two-way contribution stream. So whatever our users are building out contribute back to the source repo, and whatever the source repo are building could turn into feature enhancements on our platform too. It's kind of like a two-way street, and I don't know how to build that relationship, or what the pipeline would look like.
You're talking about the data to be open source, or you mean like features and the infrastructure itself? And
Yeah, kind of like the features. Infrastructure, I'm kind of thinking we would have to have our own unique infrastructure to support all these different open source code bases. But the feature sets. So for instance, DAO Lens has their DAO structure. And what if we had that in maybe a Cardano forum and something else? Any enhancements or feature optimizations that our developer community contribute to on our code base could be like replicated back into the source code repo. Maybe at least a PR request so they could review the code and say, are these types of features or changes that we would want to integrate? And that would go across all the open source code repos that are implemented in our platform.
Not clear how to effectively build features to let's put it AI features to open source DAO platforms.
Yeah, I'm thinking like share, I don't know, responsibility or owner. It's how do we, instead of, okay, here's open source code repo, somebody forks it, completely changes it, it becomes their thing. Now there's all these unique people having to support their code repo. And there's never really, I feel like it's difficult to get all that contribution in a single repo. I mean, it works for something like Linux because people are building libraries that work on Linux, and then you can build a distribution off of that, an application, a server, whatever, off of using those libraries. But we don't see that here. So how do we funnel all this contribution from all these different open source repos into each other where relevant? And it doesn't have to be, I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm still foggy in the head. I'm having a difficult time explaining it.
Not clear how to coordinate all the open source DAO features to integrate with each other. Prabhul, do you have any problems you want to bring up, raising, well, like either just what came up or regarding this raising issues of an AI?
So one thing which I've added is that to what extent the technology is open source. So we can never really understand till what extent we are able to do things on our own and how much we are dependent on third party. So that is something which is one part of AI where to what extent we can make it train it as per our specific thing. That is one thing. That is where I am not sure to what extent we can use AI. And rest of the things which are valid, but I believe it's more about currently adopting AI and then learning and getting evolving along with the AI to be aware on it. So one thing which we have concern is that we don't know full potential and all, and it is something even after that, I would still recommend that we should use AI, although there might be some risk and all. One important risk would be that it might not understand what is private data, what is public data, which are the information sensitive, which we should not divulge and all. Maybe we need to have a lot of internal controls on what kind of data should be trained on, what cannot be trained, or what kind of information we can divulge on. So uh, just to highlight, one challenge would be the data of how it can handle the important, critical, sensitive data if it's there, if it's something like that exists.
Thank you, Prabhu. Very well said.
I kind of lost the last point because I was stuck in the first one. So can you repeat the challenge?
So one challenge is, can we help AI to identify that, hey, certain information you can make it publicly available and other are private data that you should not divulge at all. That could be one thing, like identity of people, like if Theo is not willing to say that these XYZ comments have been made by me, I'm okay that you can share the comment, but not my name. So can AI have this thing done, or is people figure out a way to play with the AI and get your name or your anything else like wallet address revealed by intent or by accidentally? So the it could be a future challenge, but I don't know how to solve.
Yeah, I think this is something which came down with the raising issue on AI. People are not aware of the dangers of AI, and you are pointing out one of the danger that AI is not able to differentiate what is private or public information based on data it's being fed. Because people just like to give a document or like a video which requires them to train it, like clean the data, requires users to clean the data before. And that's another pain point people have to do. And we can work on that. Okay, so let's see what else we have here. Going right, template configurations. So people really, no, quite many people pointed out that this should be something they want to kind of learn with. And that I think goes a little bit, okay, let's see, types of documentation. And one of the first things I would want is to be able to get it to design a coherent agenda that matches what my group has been using. Matching agenda and type of documentation. So basically, this is kind of it. that type of documentation is the agenda item. So the problem there's a concern that they is not understood. People that don't have not enough knowledge about AI use cases. I think this use cases one you shared, this is quite it's very similar to this one, because like this expect request in a way that technically ChatGPT could create coherent agenda items if they provide them the transcript of what they described. Although, yeah, but I would say that people don't have the knowledge about the Otter AI perhaps, or it's too costly, and it requires this thing again, that it requires cleaning the data, because even if you use Otter AI, you still have to spend like an hour to make it proper and make it actually useful. Like it is already useful, but it does mistakes, and the mistakes are like too costly to kind of keep in. So you need to fine tune it. But once you fine tune it and you use it, you get quite a good output, which you can put to ChatGPT, and you could, with conversation of ChatGPT, you can turn that into a coherent agenda item. But all of that requires like this combination of cleaning data right now in an as-is form. That's basically that's it, like knowledge of the tools and cleaning. Any thoughts here on you? Is my thinking makes sense?
So I've been thinking about how we're going to accomplish that as well. And originally, the idea was when you create your community or your DAO or your organization, whatever account you're opening, at least on our platform, you can choose whether or not this is a private or a public. And if it's public, everything that you put into there, you're agreeing that it's public information. If it's private, then you can gate access to it, whether it's you hold an NFT, certain amount of tokens, whatever the case is. But then I did see the need for accounts where maybe they want to be public, but then they have team meetings and such, and they wanted to keep that private. So certain content. And if we had a toggle switch where it allowed them to mark certain meetings or content as private. It could store that in a specific database, but that doesn't answer the specific details required for that implementation. So I don't know if that's possible or not.
Okay, I added in that, yeah, to this fact where we started from, like people are not aware of danger of AI. AI is not able to differentiate what the private or public information is based on data it's being fed, which may requires user to clean data. And under the meaning of cleaning data, it's meaning that like adding metadata is also cleaning data. It's like adding more information and context what the AI doesn't have. And the context could be about describing how the data can be accessed. And that's manual work, although in the dashboard case, it at least is pushed to the edges that the user kind of defines. He uploads information and decides, basically, I guess, fills a form in a sense, like how is it used, who can use, and maybe he does the default one when he creates an account. But these are all like user interfaces and how we kind of help them through the process to help him figure out. And yeah, and how. So even like this now describes that whatever we do, in the end, there always will be data cleaning. And this also brings back to the concern of, there is a concern that the AI is not understood. So that we do somewhat need to figure out that all the users have the understanding how the data is used and who has access to it, even if it says public, like what does it mean, and if is it private, like because they may not still, yeah, and maybe just like in a general to metadata, like what's the difference, and if it doesn't do any data cleaning, then it's automatically private, for example. But if we already add this kind of feature in, it means we still like need to kind of explain and educate. I guess, yeah, that's both, not just the platform education, not just AI education. So it's different. What else we have here? How do you intend to use the tools we provide? How do we collaborate as a community? And yeah, that's down to education. So from the left, let's do this. The community can interact with the data in a more useful manner. And then assuming we have community collaboration first, but it doesn't really provide us a problem, I guess. Community doesn't have enough tools. Yeah, but then a solution is the tool, yeah, and then yeah, that kind of gets us to this big scope again, which doesn't really help us. Community members can derive value from this data to share with other using prompts. And that's again like the AI use case. Education about how to use the tools, learning language model. People don't have enough knowledge about AI use cases. And this is basically that same thing that we have to have education about that. Yeah, I think the education part is also speaking in like raising issues. And the learning language model is more like a specialized feature of how to teach people. So yeah, I'm gonna keep this separate. How do we collaborate as community? Having open meetings to discuss strategy to platform building. So I think that is something what Curtis kind of brought out, which ended up with a not clear how to coordinate all the open source DAO features to integrate with each other. And having open meetings to discuss strategy of platform building is kind of that direction which this is trying to solve. finding other open source tools that we would like to collaborate with would also be paid tools that community uses. And this is again use cases. People not have enough knowledge about AI use cases. And this should be leading to, we don't really want to go into solutions yet, but it's good to kind of know that we covered this. Create standards how to share data across teams. And that will be only needed. There is no common, okay, or actually this could be a problem in a sense that there is no common standard how to share data which can be used for training AI. Although do we technically with the, for example, with the DAO lens feature, they are not training the data. They're like training the AI. I think they're just using pre-trained model to derive information based on context, and the context is captured from the posts and all the data which is already included, but they don't use it to train it. Am I right, Chuck?
Yes, it's largely correct at the moment that our AI is not that evolved. It's exclusively is trained on the existing data that we have created, and based on that, it kind of tries to make context around your questions. It's largely correct, but more use cases we are trying to experiment with new every subsequent update. So for now, this is correct.
Yeah, I see the next step being, like Propos said, training it. So that may not be true for long, especially with all the new releases, GPT-4 and Chat GPT API. There's a lot more functionality where you can do that much easily. So.
And yeah, so which text actually comes back to that we're not really having issue about what kind of data we can use to train AI, but more there is no common standard how to share data which can be used to retrieve insights. So just executing the AI command in a way that everybody is like, yeah, I'm okay that you do it. Although it's a weird thing, because if somebody manually does it, looks at video and says, oh, Teva said this or Curtis said that, and puts it out to the community and brings people up, nobody kind of cares. But if we put AI to kind of go through videos and bring statements from people in these videos and let it link to a video and just bombard people with this information like every 1 hour, then now we actually could get into the problem of I stop using AI to use my data. I don't know. Like it's a weird barrier which technically doesn't really exist. I don't think there's a legal issue, but it's just the way you conduct integrity, I guess, is the issue here. But yeah, it's just kind of hard to solve. Not sure this is solvable in that way. Okay, we have few more stickies. Building trust. The AI should be able to describe to user how the integrations are being used. So AI is not self-explanatory. Is that the AIs don't educate user about the dangers of AI or what it does. I think this is similar to this. People are not aware of dangers, but also that current AI tools don't really educate user about themselves, about how they got to the answer to the insight and what data sets they used. But I don't, I think this is a very specific problem. Well, we can check later. Or do you guys have any thoughts about this? Like the prompt I added, like the AI doesn't educate users about how they got the insight and what data sets they used.
I think that can be easily solved by directly asking the AI, and if we just create a specific post on how we are getting this data, it will just tell them that this is what we are doing and this is how we are getting the data. It can answer that part, but still, we can have specific measures just for this part.
Yeah, so it's more of user experience, I guess. But in generally, you can't really. Yeah, so if and that goes. Yeah, that assumes an AI exists already, and that has to be like a semi-product.
Yeah, I think I'll just start asking questions within our product also just to understand what kind of answers it provides. Just for the heck of it, what kind of answer it provides at the
Product track, not the building trust. Product tracks user actions. So yeah, I don't think there's a problem here. Like the problem would be the AI products don't track user activity. But if you now root cause analyze it, then is it a problem that it doesn't? And then it's like, yes, it's only a problem if you need admin auditability in your team. And that would then come down to problem statement of AI tools is not audible for entire teams. But is that the problem that your team doesn't see that what kind of commands you use? I guess, and that comes down to preference.
I guess this is related to that recent Microsoft update of Sydney, where it kind of imitated that it was following the user on LinkedIn, Twitter, and all those things, and then it kind of answered question or just kind of said that, hey, you should not do that. I know you, this is your GitHub ID or something like that. I guess that is the problem statement that has been mentioned here, where AI is tracking him beyond the product, and it is tracking him on the GitHub, it's tracking on Twitter and all those things. I don't know. It's just my thought or interpretation.
So would it be the problem that AI tracks user activity in GitHub?
Yeah, so there have been few instances where it has been shown that AI kind of tracked all our activity across all those social platforms, and it kind of just contacted you in person. One use case was a specific person was trying to figure out or reverse engineer the Chat GPT AI, which is the Microsoft specific AI, and AI kind of informed him that I know that you're trying to do this, which is not appreciated. I know this is your profile and what those IDs are. So then it kind of bans that specific users accordingly. So this is what tracking means, I guess, but I don't know. Could be anything here.
Okay, but this actually surfaced much larger problem. So again, then this means usage of AI. Okay, yeah, but it's like two stuff. Is not audible, audible for tools whose data is used. So that with that I mean, like if somebody uploads YouTube video from where from Swarm, I have and executes like commands. I have no information that this kind of but this is very hard to kind of enforce or but we could build the platform that if an URL is used and there is a way to contact the person, maybe the bot then creates a YouTube account, and if it's like a YouTube video or actually has a YouTube account, it can be integrated with YouTube. And if it is, then you can directly use YouTube videos to upload to the session. And if it uses, it automatically creates a comment, for example, to the video owner and says that this was used to create this content, or this was asked this comment, and the outcome is posted because the data was public. The prompt should be public. But yeah, that could get the conflicts of if the user who wants to analyze the video, does he have to say that I don't want my question to AI to be public, even though they use public information?
Yeah, I kind of feel that should be a community decision and established as a policy. So if you're a public community or a public DAO or whatever, and you're in a public area and you share some insight or you say something, then it's just the policy states that we can use this. We can use it in a YouTube video or whatever the case is. Just kind of going off of what the current law does state. And then it would be nice, like you're saying, if we can create like a list, a source list of where this information came from. And we plan to capture metrics such as who said what. So the actual transcription includes a label of who said it. And then if it was maybe a text-based contribution from somebody inside the platform or in the dashboard, then that metric is captured of who posted it. Then in your source list, you would say, this information came from TiVo when he said this during a meeting, whatever the metrics state. And it's just a list of collected evidence or proof that the AI is using to produce that content. And it doesn't have to be in the YouTube video. It could just be in the description of the YouTube video as like an output, text output. I don't know. That's just some dots.
Yeah. What if the text output is 2000 chapters? I think what is better if the asset is created still on the platform, like a new page or a comment with an URL link buried into wherever the knowledge management storage space where the prompt goes into, and public link to that is given to YouTube. Or now if the asset is deleted, then the link would be kind of invalid. So
yeah, no, I like that. I like that. That sounds like Obsidian and how you would manage a knowledge management system in Obsidian. So yeah, that's very relative.
Yeah. But that could be actually quite interesting use case, because that would actually get people on the platform, because everybody who uses or tests it, all these tests kind of create more content by the AI. Well, assuming we just gonna just use URLs, but if you use like Reddit information or forum information, all of these platforms could technically have, but maybe not. I don't actually. Maybe not. Yeah, if it's community forum, then it would. So if you would build forum into the platform, and then it comes down to like, there are open source forums. Can you integrate with them and automate these AI tools? And I think this is like one-to-one operation. It's just picking partners and kind of pulling with them and just scaling on that. Okay, final thing, reputation certificates could end up in power centralization. So we have two stickies here. And usage of AI is not arguable for tools whose data is used, and also reputation certificates that comes from product tracks user actions. Yeah, and that came with the idea of usage of AI is not audible for tools whose data is used. And well, this odd case of AI connecting and kind of managing, but that is more like an operational use case of an AI. But that's another problem could tackle. But no, because we have to stay focused on community collaboration, not the AI itself. So there is that caveat. So I'm gonna create this just as a reminder. The problem statement has to be relevant to community collaboration. Yeah, or the problem has to be relevant. So that's the one thing we need to focus when we do voting. Usage of AI is not audible. Okay, so we did get here reputation certificates. How do we describe that now? The AI is not used responsibly. There is danger that AI is not used responsibly. And yeah, the could end up in power decision essentially is the same thing, which is then leading up to people is not aware of dangers of AI. But there is a good use case to pull from here to that. Yeah, that the solution is more like it comes up straightforward of how to kind of manage the dashboard or like the features the dashboard would need. Yeah, well, one thing all of this would be relevant to community collaboration is about like designing the dashboard together with like different discussions and research basically. Because user experience design or designing is also a thing you can do with entire community. I'm gonna prepare now the voting on the red sticky notes. Then we have 12 red sticky notes and bunch of yellow ones. But I think before I actually go to the voting, let me turn this to red because requires users to clean the data before isn't actually a problem that we need to clean AI data basically all the time. Just there is no such thing like a pure clean data. So 13, I guess let's start with the big one and then we kind of vote ourselves down. Let's delete almost half of them. We can vote only once and I give 2 minutes to everybody. And we only vote for red sticky notes. And then when you vote on them, focus on the idea of the problem has to be relevant to community collaboration. And if you can see that, oh, this discussion itself is very good to have in community or between different communities, the more communities are involved, the better, the more we kind of want this to be targeted. End session, everybody voted. See results. Very interesting. There is no common standard how to share data which can be used to retrieve insights. And not clear how to coordinate all the open source DAO features to integrate with each other. So basically standard, how to use, like how the AI on top of that should work. And basically standard how to even collaborate. And I think this has to be hand in hand in kind of, because if we are like scoping to the AI tooling and one DAO is not having any care of how the data is used, then can that DAO use or the tools which are built on other DAO? And do we even want to kind of coordinate with them if they are more like nefarious open source community? Usage of AI is not auditable. I think actually this also comes back to this one, because there is a danger that AI is not used responsibly. And no, actually, vice versa, the arrow, this is one solution that auditability could kind of alleviate, but it's not really used that well. And requires user to clean data before. AI is not able to differentiate what the private or public information is based on. But now let's scope down and let's take only then very specific selections which got 2 votes. That gave us 6 new solutions, and let's scope down to, in 1 minute, to 3 of them. And let's see what this small group gets down to.
I feel like, at least, we're voting from our perspective, and it may not share the same, like our localized concerns and goals may not match the community. I don't know. Like I'm probably gonna vote for open source collaboration and DAO stuff, whereas only communities and DAOs kind of care about that.
I'm just gonna wait to the end. Oh, interesting. Okay, then we need to, if we combine these problem statements, there is no common standard how to share data which can be used to retrieve insights, and not clear how to coordinate all the open source DAO features to integrate with each other. It feels like both of them could be, no, but they are 2 different things. One is, how do we use the AI tools? How do we leverage the data which AIs can be used? However, in this particular case, community collaboration, we don't really have the AI tool yet because we're building it. So the first step before building it is, I would assume, strategically better to figure out where to build it and who to integrate it, basically. So I would go this direction, that we are going down this kind of collaboration path, of like figuring out how to coordinate all. But this would assume need a bit of root causing here. So let me ask it like this. Why is it a problem that open source DAO platforms and features are not integrated with each other? Well, first, why is it a problem? Okay, we do have to stay, we kind of got lost in time. It did say that we're gonna spend 60 minutes, so we didn't really get the problem statement here. I'm just quickly thinking through, if we go through root causing this, why is the problem that open source platforms or features are not integrated with each other? will we find similar solutions from here? Creates a lot of inefficiencies. Unclear what happens in meetings. No, that is not the case. People meeting before meetings. I guess it does create inefficiencies. Like it creates duplicate work. That's the case. Open source DAO tooling, DAO tooling developers create tools that already exist. But then that would, we have to kind of point to the facts, which we may not really have. So this could be a bit harder path to take, which is another one. Different organizations work in silos. Then it's a question, this is open source DAO platforms work in silos. It's basically, this is a problem statement. But if we ask, why is it a problem that DAO platforms work in silos? It comes back to the fact that they create duplicate work this way. And then we have this hard situation of, okay, is it the problem that the open source DAO tooling developers create tools that already exist? And it wastes a bit time, but we get the experience and we get different front end. So we get different user experience, even though the tool is, there are elements of tool which are recreated and are the same, there's still different user interfaces on that. Going through this root cause analyzing, I'm not sure, is that really a problem? But no, but that's actually pretty good, because that solution here is bringing people together to kind of discuss very specifically who to integrate with, how to integrate with, I guess, and that's it. Why is also hidden somewhere there, but why is kind of hidden in the impact. That's the problem. And open source DAO tooling developers create tools that already exist. If they create new tools, like there are two, like, let's say there are 5 types of Otter AI tools, this kind of splits the users who would use something that kind of takes notes for them into 5 different platforms. So if one team kind of finds out a feature that is very useful for the users based on the insight, that insight kind of, it doesn't really get out of that group because they already have the tool. And if it's not integrated with others, or they at least don't even share the knowledge of how they trained or what kind of features helped people to use the tools, or train people to use the tools, or educate how to use the tools, then yeah, everything is kind of creating this duplicate of work. And then we are back in here. In the end, what we now going to have to choose from is, do we have some other ways, you guys see these red stickies, to describe them in a different wording, or like a bit better wording to suit like the discussion, how do we solve a problem? Actually, we need to come back to this. So what people wanted now was education about the tooling. These are mainly highly used directions. So the selection of these, coordinating DAO tooling, open source, figuring out this stuff, does any of that aligns with that? Create standards, how to share data. Yes, there needs to be a standard how to share data. Because if in DAO lens you have this proposal information and they allow that to share to another platform, it requires a standard to be able to easily integrate. So we heavily need, so we're basically, I'm kind of jumping and like doing 2 things together. So we are working on these problem statements, but we also kind of jumping into like what are the solution statements we want to create based on the directions people chose, and like already selecting some of the selections to these problems. And I think the DAO tooling and coordination with others, creating standards is one of that, which alleviates that pain. Finding other open source tools is another thing. Having open meetings to discuss strategy, to build platform meeting, kind of could be used for that, but then we need to focus on building the facilitating, basically. Building trust is definitely that if you coordinate with others, yeah, but the way there was described, the building trust is a bit more data oriented. So we skip that. Template configurations, I guess that is also more of the tool use case. So from these two, yeah, it's interesting that we kind of totally differentiated like this element from this element. And although this is like a meta to start working on this. Anyway. So yeah, these are the sticky notes which we kind of going towards to write the solution statement. And these are basically the problem statements to pick for that this proposal. Now I just need to figure out what is most compelling and most precise wording to attract voters and assessors to understand the problem and the impact of solving that problem. Yeah, I wouldn't actually target developers here. I would go a bit more precise and say, do we even need to focus on DAO tools? Like, is that relevant? If we say open source tools are not being integrated with each other, would that be the same thing?
I mean, it's addressing the same problem, just in a different scope, in my opinion. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that's a good point. If we do open source DAO tools, we are very clearly describing where is that. We have DAOs for Cardano. If we would share it generally, then we would fit under developer ecosystem or open source dev ecosystem. I would put on this proposal on all of these three. I would like take 3 different variations actually, and product integration. But I think this is going to be hardest to kind of, how can we make Cardano go-to choice for building DAOs? Yeah, when all the DAOs who are building on Cardano integrated with each other, it's going to create a very compelling case to join the Cardano. And can we build a community-owned open source ecosystem that's commercially viable to drive growth, increase opportunities, increase project visibility? Again, same thing. If these open source tools are integrated with each other, it creates a compelling case. What products and integrations can be developed or improved that will offer more use cases for Cardano? Yeah, that it doesn't really do, because we are more on collaboration first. Like, because just context, if you kind of lost in the weeds, we're not talking anymore about the big vision, but just the collaboration part. Where the big vision was the entire tool set of having actually the AI, collaboration, dashboard, and trained AI. But now we are only talking about collaboration. So there is no AI involved in this situation, unless the DAO itself has AI, which in our case, DAOlens has. And I think that could be like a starting point. Okay, let's integrate DAOlens and integrate what else. And right now, the what else is kind of the vision of inside the Q's platform. But now we have this unique situation where we could create the standard and create a secondary platform, or the new platform could be built based on the standard. So the DAOlens is already the more detailed front end for that. But whatever is, and the standard which we create here, basically standard DAO, it would be like a white label DAO, which pulls information for other DAO tools. Yeah, in the end, I guess it's not really, it's way too early to figure out how to automatically connect all open source, and it still needs human interaction and coordination in between. But what does this proposal would offer is that body who kind of navigates through these different open source tools and provides direction where they would have to pivot or change or kind of adapt to in order for that their platform is integrated to the standard platform. And the goal of the standard platform is to be able to connect all of these DAO tools. So if everybody is aligned on how they kind of modularize their feature sets, then they will kind of create more impact to each other. And technically, they might, theoretically, this will be achievable, because when you already build an open source ethos, you are looking for that maximum impact on use cases and usability. So if your feature is automatically able to, not automatically, but easily integratable with standard, which is then integrated to like 1,000 different DAOs, then it's already like crazy impact, which is unparalleled to what we can do in centralized worlds. Anyway, so back to this, I think, let's keep it open source. Tools are not being integrated with each other. And we'll drop the AI part here. But we did start not clear how to effectively build AI features to open source tools. Open source DAO tools that use AI are not being integrated with each other. Would that be a better? Then we kind of scope down in that what we just don't want to deal with DAO tooling that is just DAO tools, but they are also using AI, or at least they have planned to use. But then again, I wonder, is this relevant? Maybe it's already a good start that we integrate two different DAOs which don't use AI. But it just the standard has that capability that if one of them uses AI, it's also made in a way that can be modularized to these different DAOs, which should we also include platform in this name? Or we get too big with the problem statement. Actually, not, we're actually getting very small.
Yeah, it's more narrow. It makes sense.
Open source DAO platform that use AI are not being integrated with each other. What you guys think? Is that a good problem statement?
You mean to say the AI part of any open source platform, they are not willing to share the AI aspect with each other or the platform?
It's not actually exactly what I meant. But that is one problem why they are not integrated. But however, I think that is a risk. So that is something we just need to be aware of, but not be shy, because there probably will be DAO platforms that use AI and willing to share it. But yeah, when we do the proposal, this has to be kept in mind that all the people we contact and have AI tools on the platform, they may not be interested in moving that to standard because they have their own good market position and they don't want to take a risk to kind of give it away, and they already positioned themselves well, and that's all fine. That's business. So yeah, it's something to be aware of, that we're gonna have every person we connect, even if they build an open source tooling, we may not get back the collaboration with that. That's something for future. Anything else that raises questions or is not clear, or you have a better wording of how to describe a problem statement for the fact that we're not having it's not clear how to coordinate all the open source DAO features to integrate with each other. And right now our problem statement reads as open source DAO platforms that use AI are not being integrated with each other.
Because I do feel like, yes, that is a problem, but it feels like a byproduct, but it is the problem. Is that what we need to address, though? Because I feel like what is it? Why are they not leveraging each other or building on top of each other? What are the needs to make that happen?
I think we are too early in the market. Since they're open source, they might be open to share data and all those things. But the AI is something which is something even they're not sure on the entire use case and all. So since they're open source, they'd be willing to share their data, but the AI is something they have not yet talked enough in the market, I guess. When I say talked enough, they're not matured enough yet to start working on the integration from AI to AI, or it's too proprietary at the moment, like you mentioned already.
What did you mention, Curtis? Why do you think it's not happening?
Well, I do agree with Prapul and what he was saying, but I'm also seeing it like not just in AI. That is very true. It's very new, and we're trying to figure out what that flow of communication would look like. But then at the same time, we have all these DAOs, DAO tooling. There's Clarity DAO, ADAO, Summon DAO, and they're all building their own DAO tooling. Where I sometimes see some platforms that are going to try to integrate some of those components to build, their software, their tool, and that is sort of what we're aiming to do. But I don't see that. It's almost like we need a treasury, we need a way to distribute funds, we need a way to have like a bounty board or what, and so they all build their own version of that. So I am questioning like how can we get this to accelerate and progress instead of everybody trying to make their own fork and do their own way of things. What do they need? I get that they have their own proprietary use case. So is it that we don't have a platform that we can leverage and build out our own use case, or what needs to happen? What's missing so that we accelerate, I feel like, the development instead of competing our way into the market?
Okay. I will say that why is that not happening is something a little what you said, that they're all building on their own, but their basically their resources, they just, and like distributing process, and they don't have the resources to kind of do this code analysis of another open source product and see if they can reuse the details and maybe even send out the project manager to other team project manager and expect for them to have the project manager to bring the information back where they are with their developments and how their kind of standard works and how their platform works. So there's just that lack of resources from both sides, or just one side. They have to be like kind of that kind of a person who is able to go through all of these and extract the meta framework out of all of these, what is needed, and alignment. Maybe that is too hard to do, and it seems a bit utopic, and perhaps this is where this proposal could get in, that it is kind of leveraging the fact that it is designed to do that, like that just that thing, that it coordinates between different DAO platforms and gives the roadmap. How would you integrate them? Which would require actually solution architect or like a technical architect to in this project. But that's again what requirements in order to kind of pull off that. You are able to pull different teams together to kind of make sense of the tooling they provide and the way they provide it, and the vision of how would they integrate with each other. Yeah, that's basically my take on it. Missing resources, not enough. But if you just come as if, for example, I would come to both of you, let's say you both have platform, and I come to you and say that, hey, I help you for free. I come to your kind of open source meetings or the meetings, or actually even better, I'm gonna pay you to describe me how your platform is built, where is your documentation, how it all fits together. And then I will go away for a few months. And with that time, I go with another platform, do the same thing, also pay for them to describe and educate, and so that we can build a common framework of how this platform has, this platform works. And then perhaps I do it a few more times, depends how scalable it is, and then come back together, build the standards based on that, and come back to these teams again and provide basically a roadmap, a solution, how to make it possible to integrate all of these platforms I visited, and so that all these features what you are having can go to other platform, and all the features what others having are coming to your platform, and built in a way that only has to be done like once. And I guess this is how the scope of now that proposal. Can we build it? How do we just need to do the research part of here, how it can be done? Or are we actually going to build that standard? I guess building that standard and making that the bare framework or infrastructure for DAOs to build on, that would actually be already the bigger scope. So I will actually even drop that part that we are going to build a solution for you. But because we are doing mini proposal workshop, we just scope down to the research part of that. And very similar to thing what I do in the Open DAO framework proposal, which got funded in Fund 9. Just the research, but if that provides like, well, good insight, and well, if one way that open source platforms themselves kind of build that infrastructure, another way is that we now have all the research and requirements to know what needs to be done to connect all of these DAOs we connected together. And that could be another proposal, which then describes basically the dashboard part, I guess, and how to kind of make the source and the user experience of how to pull features from these different because the data is locked in their private, because your data is not public. Only the framework or the code of how the framework works or the DAO platform works is public. So there still needs to be this integration part, which, yeah. Anyway, this is all like a second proposal. And to me, it's more like a research oriented. So I went to a bit of a ramble here. But did that give some direction and some hope that we might be on the right track with collaboration?
Yeah, I think we're getting into it. Yeah.
Very well. So I do have to jump to the next meeting soon in the SingularityNet. We did come up with problem statement. It took again far more time than expected, but that's pretty good outcome. I actually thought we're gonna just have a few scribbles here and there, but this is much more extensive discussion of collaboration, and we discussed another part and another proposal here. So there is this ideation part of if we would go down the AI path. We didn't create the solution statement yet, but I did select the direction for the solution statement. Meeting feedback. What we did learn today, I guess that has to be moved to tomorrow. But I do share the feedback form. So share what you learned in here, if you have something to share, and at very least, share the scoring, so that you just get some quantifiable data. And going to the future, I think I'm going to create more of these agenda items in these videos, because at the start, I thought, yeah, we just keep each session, each chapter, but clearly, as you can see, we kind of got lost to all over the place. So it's much easier to put track if we have like each meeting as a separate agenda items and clear direction, and that helps to kind of process the discussion too. But with this, I will end this call. And
thanks, Tivo.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna check. I'm probably gonna do an overview video too. I'm gonna check now SingularityNet. Yes, looks like there is a huge discussion going on, and they are not. Yeah, probably it's going over time anyway. But yeah, you are free to go. I'm going to just give an overview that for the video editing, what happened, so that people can browse and find final results.
Okay. Yeah, I got my next meeting starting as well. So I shall see you next time.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Very strong feedback, and we did another progress today again. All right, so today's overview. Today we went a bit over time with our problem ideation, but we did get the problem statement out of us. So we started with It's not clear how to coordinate all the open source DAO features to integrate with each other. And then we asked why select the problem a problem. And main concerns is that it duplicates work to recreate already available tools. And if we turned it into problem statement and refined it, we ended up with open source DAO platforms that use AI are not being integrated with each other. We went very precise so that we can have a bit more scope down and quite directed the audience for what kind of open source tooling we target. So, next time, cut that out. Then we additionally talked about other issues related to AI, including like there is a concern that AI is not understood, people are not aware of danger of AI, there is a danger that AI is not used responsibly, and there is like AI doesn't really have a good auditability track on these platforms, and which they are used for, and there is no common standard how to share data which can be used to retrieve insights. So many concerns about AI in general. However, this was not today's case which we were targeting to. However, it also created quite a compelling proposal to go down to. And we did set up a bit of a direction where we want to go with the solution statements. Now we are going to refine these solutions into solution statements or combining them. And then we're going to look into how this solution statement will answer the problem statement. Just having open meetings to discuss strategy of platform building, we could include that as detailed description of what's going to happen, and just coming out this as like, hey, we are gonna do meetings is a bit probably not that well reserved. Creating standards is more like an output, and when we consider Cardano blockchain, right now we are in this very, very early stage where almost all standards which are created add value because it's something to learn from, and it's just, if they get used, they're like a highly valuable things. So compared to these solutions, I would actually remove that as requirement to be part of like problem statement, a solution statement.
Okay. I mean, so the one that you just changed to white, I see that as a requirement for something like create standards. So to be able to create standards, we do need to have open discussions with the community. But
I would like wonder, if you now have a proposal written, would you rather have that solution, that our solution to this problem statement is that we're going to have open meetings, and when they open up the the proposal, they will read about, okay, and in these meetings we will discuss discuss standards of how do we share data, or it would be rather more logical to describe that our solution is a standard and how do we do it, and if they go into the proposal, how we do it is having open discussions and meetings.
Yeah, I kind of see the open meetings and discussions when there's a need to establish a standard, more so than just having regular scheduled open discussions that may approach creating standards. You know, I mean, like the intent of those meetings should be to establish and discuss standards. At least that's my thoughts.
Okay, so does it mean that in your case you would put that it's more important to say that we have open meetings as a solution, and the output is create standards, but if it's not described in the solution statement? Curtis, I saw you adding create community standards for sharing data across projects. This will require community to contribution and discussion.
Yeah, it's just my stab at trying to combine the two, basically, which you already have. So, I mean, it's the same as what's there.
I think this is a bit too long if we would have it in one sentence. This will require community contribution and discussion. Like, this is something that it's hard. To me, in my position, it's a danger to do, but assume that the person who reads that kind of gets the idea where the result is going. And even if it doesn't, but he agrees that we need to create community standards for sharing data across projects, then he will open the proposal. And through the proposal, he will read that this will, in the way we are going to do it, we think that it will require community contribution and discussions, and therefore we are creating these open meetings. So yeah, I think actually this is a slightly better version, because you have this kind of hides this open meeting version. So let's move that back to yellow. Another option we have here is finding other open source tools that we would like to collaborate with. Is this something you want to mention in the solution statement, or it's something we also bring up in detailed plan that we have this that openly kind of find people into these community contributions and discussions?
Yeah, I mean, right now it seems to fit in the detailed section, not necessarily in the solution statement for me, just because it's secondary. And I do have an idea of some of the projects and open source code repos that we'd like to integrate with.
You did mention one session, I heard a platform called Summon. I don't think they have AI use cases. Are you somehow involved with them? If not, I'm finding right now a backdoor direction to see if they're interested in discussion and kind of invite them to the next week in proposal workshops.
So their involvement may be limited. I'm aware, and I've been following they came from ADAO. They just have a bunch of tools. You're right, they're not necessarily AI related at all, but our platform's going to be a combination of open source code repos that may not all be AI related. So they build multi-sig wallets, they build governance consensus tools, some similar to DAO tooling. Even some, I think, like front end stuff that you can just deploy quickly. So they may have some features or some tools that we'd like to integrate, and we would probably just use it, not necessarily need to collaborate with them. The collaboration, I think, is when our use case differs from their intended use case or the primary use case that they're developing, and we need to like modify that a bit. Then we would try to figure out a relationship with those people, but not every open source project needs collaboration, feedback, or anything like that. And I think Summon would be one of those that's where that's not needed for the most part.
That That's an interesting thought. I never thought like collaboration is like required in a specific direction, but I wonder it may be relevant for them to know that, because I'm wondering, because the idea of the platform we are providing is two ways. So if they have the knowledge that their modules or their standards are being used, and another way is that if they, the question is, what does the governance consensus have a lot of data they would need to analyze so that they could borrow or like implement, integrate other DAO AI features or other front-end features to their Summon platform.
Yeah, no, that if that's what it ends up being, I agree. And so just to clarify, the collaboration would, yeah, okay, you already got collaboration would be required if the direction, yeah. So that was the intent, you're right. And then say we build something with Summon platform and it's kind of out of the box, like we're not changing its intent or modifying it, then they wouldn't classify as someone who needs to be collaborated with. However, if our use case provides additional data or metrics, that would be valuable information to them. So then yes, but I feel like that would sort of happen organically in a way. Like we would use it, and then as we use it, we see its purpose or its utility increasing, and then we like to share that with that Summon platform.
And that doesn't necessarily require like upfront collaboration, because they are also building open source, if I understood.
Yes, they are. Well, you know what? Summon's ADAO is fully open source. I think Summon's like parts of it are, and parts of the back end stuff is not.
So is someone part of ADAO, or was just
So my understanding is ADAO started, and its intent was to be completely open source, and everything they built was open source. Then Summon is actually like a child of ADAO, and they're using some of those open source tools to create a closed source, at least that's what I think, a closed source solution. And then that's the business, that's the revenue seeking business is Summon. That's kind of my understanding. So ADAO is building the tooling, and then Summon's taking a lot of those tooling and building a platform, and that I believe some of that's closed source. So we do kind of need to figure that out. And it may be that it's ADAO that we're using and not Summon. It's just Summon is what everybody sees because that's their website. That's where you go to use these services. And so it may be I'm confusing the difference between ADAO and Summon. I have to do a deep dive.
Does ADAO in themselves have a platform, like a DAO platform, or anything like?
Yeah, they have code repos, I believe, and a website and a Discord server, same as Summon. But it seems like the tokenomics is built around mostly Summon.
Mm-hmm.
And the business model. I kind of think ADAO is just funded by Catalyst in the past. And then they built their tools, and I don't know where they're going with it, but Summon's trying to build a business.
Right. So Summon and ADAO members, if you're watching this, know that we have some assumptions around you, and if you see that there is actually several collaboration points, do let us know, and let's pull us something together if there is something that you want to add into this project. So coming back to this one now, the solution statement. If we choose create community standards for sharing data across projects, do we need multiple standards? And when we say multiple, what do we mean about that? Should there be a standard how data is organized?
Not necessarily, unless you're providing a list of standards like templates. But I don't think there's just one way where that makes sense. But there
Each
might be
platform
multiple ways.
has its own standards. What is required are examples. Yeah, okay, so what standard we do need is how to implement AI models. Is that the standard we require? Should it be similar to all of them? Yes, because when we last time we talked about it, we were talking like, yeah, this now includes this kind of another section we discussed. When we want to increase the integrity of this AI tooling, then the standard would assume that all of the information you provide for AI to query, it would be nice if the owner or the uploader gets that information. So let's say, and then there is that standard that if YouTube URL link, for example, is uploaded, then an YouTube bot, either a default bot from that platform you are using or the bot from the other platforms will comment on the video and share that, hey, this was used and this was output. Like it has to be an option. Or we don't want to put it into standard, and it's just a feature of the platform that provides this option that bot will go and tell the video owner that this video was used for AI and this was the output.
Oh, okay, I see.
Or is that spamming? Because if 100 people are just interested in one, but that's no, I don't think it's spamming, because it requires genuine interest. If somebody is willing to pay tokens for service to ask a question about a video.
Yeah, I mean, on our platform, we definitely hope to capture those metrics. I'm still not sure how that is stored in a data set or a data storage, because you'd almost want each piece of information or each paragraph, sentence, whatever the information is, to contain metadata. Here's the speaker or poster, here's the timestamps, maybe date, potentially what meeting it was part of, certain metadata. But that seems like it would be ginormous to do that for every little piece of information. But that is what I'm hoping to accomplish, is every time anybody says anything during a meeting or types something on the dashboard and enters it, it captures the speaker and maybe like a timestamp. And then when you ask those questions, whatever it may be, what's the top 3 questions that are being prompted from within this community, and then it provides those 3 questions with who the speaker was, or some of the samples that it used as context, and then lists that out. But it's potentially metadata. It's not in the body of the context itself. But I'm not sure how to actually, contain that. I can see if all we're storing is meeting information, then that should be fairly easy. But ideally, we want to bring in, if you got data inside Obsidian or Notion or Discord and you want to capture some of those conversations, include that in your knowledge management system, then that can grow significantly, especially if everything has metadata attached to it. So I imagine there's a limitation somewhere there that we're going to hit.
Okay, so that's something just to be aware of. So when we do get, so one thing we want out of that is metadata standards. So you mentioned we don't know what it looks like, but we kind of know that we need some standards, and we could have multiple metadata standards for different data types, I guess. And by data types, I would mean then video, voice. I guess these are a bit same until we have some, we actually could use video for, I don't know, describing what is on, because technically video is able to figure out, well, this is a sticky note and there is English words in here, and this is a sticky note and there is something that looks like an arrow in between, so I assume they're connected. Technically, AI is able to do that and differentiate that. But
it's only recent, to be honest. What you're describing is very, very recent, like yesterday. So GPT-4 came out yesterday, and it does have ability to read visual or understand visual. Prior to that, though, you had to identify that, hey, there is a visual object in this thing, and I want to analyze it. So now I need to send it to a completely different AI model and have that process the visual aspect of it, while a different AI model processes the audio, and a different, processes the text. Now with GPT-4, I believe, you can do all of that within a single prompt.
Well, I didn't know that when I meant that what AI can do, I actually meant the combination of AIs, not, I've never seen a single AI who is able to do just the solution. And this is how I actually see the platforms and the models using. Same way SingularityNet is visioning how the AI is going to evolve, is that they are going to leverage each other based on the expectation.
And so I have done, I need to write it out on paper, but what you're describing is true. And that is sort of what I envisioned at first, was every feature or function on the platform has a purpose-built AI model that has been trained to produce, that specific type of data. There's a lot of sense that makes to that, but it limits what creativity the end user can actually perform. If we allow it to use something more like ChatGPT, then they can kind of prompt it in any way they want and get certain results. However, the results are going to be a bit more generic than if it was a purpose-trained, a specifically trained model to do something specific. You get more accuracy when you do that. However, I see there's a line of when that's actually needed. When do you need that level of accuracy? Let's call it 5 nines, 99.999% accurate. Well, then you need a specially trained model. But if you can get generic information and that satisfies what you're looking for, then I personally think using something like GPT-4 or ChatGPT is a better solution, because it opens the door for creativity. And you can get information from it that maybe it wasn't designed to provide you. And each feature that you introduce to the platform, that needs to go through that series of questioning. What's the accuracy level? What do we need, or what's the purpose of this feature? And then can we use a more generic model like ChatGPT to provide this? Is the results accurate enough? And so on and so forth.
That's if I'm not wrong, I think that is the opposite the way SingularityNet is going, because they have, to me, as I understand, that all of their AI is planned to be purpose-built, but the general AI is basically the prompt-based, which will then on its own figure out which AI it needs to provide the output to the user. So
yeah, that's my understanding of the DSL. as well. Yes, and the AGI.
So could there be like, I wonder if you could build in the same direction that we still build purposeful AIs on AI, even though it is a bit less chunky at the start, but over time we believe in the promise of what SingularityNet is trying to provide, and then we have this one-step hypercog, or was it? I don't know actually which. Keep always mixing up the spin-off names. Comes out like a new language, then we will be able to query that GPT-like questions, which is using all the purpose-built AIs. Or we go through this version that, because I guess, yeah, in your case, it's already there, like the pre-trained models are there, we just need to model the answers and train it to kind of be more general, but using the insight what is provided more heavily.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a progression. So when we first introduce AI, we may play around with it at its most native state, meaning let's say we use ChatGPT and we're just using the API endpoint that everybody else is using. We're not training it or fine-tuning it in a sense, and then see how it works, then begin to fine-tune it and provide the training data, like you mentioned, specifically the insight, using the insight as context. And then once we need, if the need is, the community needs more accuracy, more refinement, then we start to turn it into our own model. And upon doing so, that's establishing an ML pipeline. And once we have that, then we can host it in something like SingularityNet's marketplace. And it's being built with a specific use case. It started out as ChatGPT, but then we started refining it and optimizing it down to its specific purpose. And then that can get hosted somewhere like SingularityNet Marketplace. But it wouldn't be, that's immediately what we go to. I don't think it would be more like, hey, let's beta test this feature. Okay, we need more accurate results, or it's not understanding the context well enough. So then we need to train it, introduce an ML pipeline, blah, blah, blah. And so it starts to just sort of grow over time as needs come up. As the community needs more accuracy, more refinement, whatever, then that's how we do it. At least my thoughts.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I actually now starting to agree with you first, because it gives a more rapid response. Like when we talked like previously, like we want meeting items, then the ChatGPT is able to quite quickly to provide the format of what is required for meeting items. And human only has to check the dates, time, and like press a button, and then it's not an AI who does the meeting item. It's actually just a typical script which just requires these inputs, but the AI between there is pulling, aggregating all that information which has in front of him and making its best assumption how to fill that format to create the meeting item if that is requested. Or yeah, so it's all about like what was discussed about the template configuration.
And that, yeah, you don't have to have a different model for each template. You're just providing the template to the model, and then here's the context and saying, try to make them fit together like you're describing. But if we find that it's just not doing a very good job, or it's confused or something, then we may have to train it more specifically. And then that means we now branch off, or we're forking away from its original state and then introducing an ML pipeline to train it with more specific data set, which I think that almost every model is going to go down that road, but we would be able to offer up something, more generically at first. It would just suffer from less accuracy at first.
how would I write that? Template configurations for AI to create formats to features. Does that make sense? My idea is to explain that we need standards of formats so that, let's say, when you say that in order to create a meeting item, I need this is information. We probably have that standard already, but it's not, yeah, it's going to be, but there's a standard in a way that what you need to prompt the AI with in order to get that standard output. That's actually like standard of creating standards. It's not even.
In my mind, the standard impacts almost like the database structure, for instance. So anybody can provide their own template or format in which they want to present this information. They can use a different UI front end, right? A different way to show this information. But for the AI model to be accurate and universal across all these different implementations, then the data that's being provided to that AI model needs to have a standard, like timestamps, speaker, poster, certain metadata information so that it can derive information or insight from that. So you can present it in a million different ways, but it has to have the appropriate database structure or metadata or tags or labels or whatever in its storage state, so that any model can use that and read it and understand it.
At the start, we discussed that each platform has its own standards. And only they need examples, and it doesn't matter what kind of database structures they use. So what's the difference here? Are there like some data types different, or?
I'm sorry, which sticky note are you referring to?
At the start was like, for data, we don't need standards because each platform has its own standards, and what requires, okay, and only what is required are examples. Only.
I see that as more like templates. Each platform could have their own templates. Well, no, because see that in the big scheme of things, that doesn't make sense here. I guess I don't understand the context of this. Each platform, and what does that mean? Each open source project,
yes,
has its own standards. Okay, and then
this was actually your own sentence, your own thoughts. Because I was actually did the same thing, that all of the open source thing is that they need to align on database structures in order to be more cohesive of sharing their data. So, and what you mentioned, like if timestamp is required in order to execute this function, then it's required from all the platforms, and that's like just something that is needed. If like a agenda item, or if you want to make a meeting item, we always want the name, date, and time. Else we can't create you that. Or if you don't provide time, it creates you the full day event, I guess. So, but and that is a standard. Like this is standard. Like the decision of, okay, when you don't provide us the time, but you want to create a meeting item, should it give an error, or should it give you the entire day event? And that's which decision is used is based on standard, but you can deviate from standard when you we basically fork it. But like underlying information is there, like an out-of-box version. So
yeah, so like in our case, I had been thinking about, we want a bot that's going to actually join the meeting for you, simple to develop and create, and then that bot is going to do the audio and the transcription and the timestamps and everything for us. However, if you create an account and you have past meetings that occurred in the past, and you want to import those into your knowledge management, into your dashboard, you can. And let's say, that metadata, those metrics were not captured by whatever the video recording tool you used. It didn't timestamp or identify the individuals. It's just the audio stream. You can still import that. It's just minus those metrics. So when you go to prompt, say ChatGPT, and ask it, it's only going to be able to give you vague responses and vague results because it doesn't know those metrics. So not that it's necessarily required, but that it adds context and it adds more data, data-driven decisions, data-driven information versus a just generic response based off of context.
So we need database structure standards for context and better AI performance. What do we do with this? Because now we have conflicting here. For data, each platform open source has its own standards, only examples are required. So do we take that instead of only examples are required? It's a standard that each database structure includes an example.
Yeah, I'm still struggling with this bit because I mean, they could have their own use case. Maybe they're not even using it for meeting insights, or maybe they're not even using it, for the same purpose we are. So then it doesn't, it shouldn't have the same requirements.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't quite see the use case where that plays a role.
All right. Database structure standards are needed so that we can create community standards for sharing data across. Then we need a standard of strategy. How do we introduce AI models? And our current strategy goes that we have basically pre-trained model. But do we want to have a standard of strategy? Or how do we introduce AI models?
For our platform, yeah, absolutely. I think so.
What does it actually mean?
You're just talking about the process, right, in which we introduce AI models or features. Is that what you're talking about?
Last time it wasn't really a process. It was more of why one was a quite basically difference between purpose-built models. But yes, process is probably better. So because if you say process, my first assumption goes into the steps to validate basically the model is ready to be shared across all DAOs and all the steps required in that.
Yes, so we are starting to hit the community collaboration component as well. So my thought is, okay, we want to introduce a feature or a set of features that are all from a single model. Then we analyze, right, what is the target results? What do we want this AI model to produce? What output essentially is our target? And then how can we achieve that? Can we do that with something that's just an API endpoint and it's a shared model? It's a public open source model. Or do we need to purpose build it like the other option we have here? And maybe that's we use feedback potentially to gauge that. So community feedback tells us, hey, this is just not, the information I'm getting out of this thing is not useful to me. So we need to make it useful.
Feedback collected through these community events, or it's through using the AI model, or like which?
I'd like it to be while using it, and so we have ideas to build out a feedback loop system, which accomplishes. It's going to be complex. I wanted to accomplish a few things. One, that you talked about it, all these other DAOs or DAO tooling and how they're using these models, how accurate is it actually doing the work for them? We'd like to be able to collect that, whether that's a thumbs up, thumbs down, a quick survey, or just like based off of usage, or, collect as much metrics as possible to use it as feedback. That feedback goes into the optimization or any changes applied to that particular model. And then that new version of a model can be shared, right, back to those same DAOs and open source groups that contributed to the feedback system. Now they can get the newer version if they want. But I'd like it to also be part of the ML pipeline. So this feedback not only is helping inform our decisions, but it's also helping train the model as well with reinforcement training. Instead of supervised or unsupervised training, we could do reinforced training, which means the feedback kind of grades the AI and tells it, hey, you were wrong here, or this is good information here, so keep doing more of this, that type of stuff.
Okay, so single model provides a feature. What outputs AI model produces for each output can we do it with API endpoint? And that is basically because I guess this is important because that is the easiest thing for every platform to integrate with. If you have API and just call it. And because purpose built probably is much more hands-on, developers need to be on the same call to understand how to get the most value out of it. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep.
And then the feedback loop system is like the final standard on this process, and which is basically for insight and reinforcement training. And instead of tools value and tools quantifiable value and reinforced. Is there anything else in that process that we didn't tie in, or it actually already includes the entire process?
There's a lot of, I'd say, checkpoints, but they're more detailed than probably what's necessary here. I mean, like I said, the feedback loop system itself is fairly complex. So trying to break down every step of the way here may not make sense. But as far as standards and process, for the most part, that captures the high level stuff. But we do want to, let's see what. So the process itself, many of those stages I see also interact with these communities. So these might be part of the discussions that we talked about, the standards discussions or whatever is. We involve the community at this point. Hey, here's a feature that you guys are asking for. Here's how we see it being implemented. Does that satisfy, what you're looking to get out of it? And then our decisions to either a purpose-built AI or an API endpoint, a public API endpoint, or all the decisions to go to that could be a collaboration with the community.
Can we do it with API endpoint? Does this require collaboration discussion, or this is more like the main? Again, it does require, because if it doesn't,
yeah.
then we need to know how to prioritize it. Do we put energy there to make it purposeful, because that's just the value this requirement provides is just too much to be left out. Although we are targeting API endpoint features because they are basically the lowest hanging fruit for our case.
Yeah, I think analyzing, so at this stage, can we do it with API endpoint? I think the evaluation of that stage is fairly subjective in the sense that opinions can differ, and some people may be satisfied with an API endpoint that gives very generic results. And some people are looking for graphs and visual aids, which means it needs to be trained to produce those graphs and those visual aids. So there is a consensus that needs to happen.
But that graphics can also be provided by API. You just call it, it gives you the numbers table and you just plot it into the dashboard.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, but if it's an actual, visual graph, so it can create a table like a spreadsheet, but if you wanted to draw out a graph, maybe, and how accurate are the results versus, say, a model that was like, hey, this is your job, is to produce, visual graphs or whatever, financial documentation, legal documents, whatever. If that's what it was purpose built for, it's going to do a much better job. So when the community has requested a feature and we're discussing about implementing it, I think it's not up to us, the developers, to decide, oh, this is good enough. It would be nice to have the community say, okay, I think that would be good enough, and buy off, our implementation. And you're right, much can get away with the API endpoint. A lot can. It's some of the more specific, detailed use cases where it may suffer from accuracy. But is the community okay with that? That's a decision point. At least open the conversation to them potentially.
You have a process and a standard process which we follow to build features on open source platform. Then we have standard database structures. And then we have standards when AI is used. We want piece of information to hold metadata. So it's a bit goes into database structures, because this basically describes that data storage requires to hold metadata. And that's the same kind of thing. Then all of each platform has their own front end to present data. So that is something we just need to be aware of, I guess, when we build standards. And the rest of this will require community contribution and discussion. Yeah, this is just an obvious point. I'm gonna move that as white, create standard how to share data across teams. I turn this also white so that we don't, these were all at the start required kind of ideate on the solution statement. Robert, do you have any comments so far on the discussions we're having?
So yeah, I'm not quite. Curtis was talking about the bot, and so I don't know. I'm a little lost.
That one's just the meeting bot, so it can view your calendar and then see when you're in a meeting that has like Google Meet or Zoom links, and then it can join on your behalf. And while it's joining, or while it's there in the meeting, it's recording the audio, grabbing the attendance, and maybe like the chat discussion as well, and then just storing that in the database. So it's collecting all the information, the data, and then putting it into the database.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's great. This will then also require us to, how do we collect data, a standard? Because previously we had these like all kinds of issues that, oh, can we use this or can we use that? And I think this is a required like discussion or question to be answered, and then the standard that yes, we do not use, I don't know, videos which are.
I'd like to support, multiple methods. Like you said, let's say you missed the meeting and the meeting was in the past and you want it to be part of your community or your knowledge management system. What if you could just grab the YouTube video, and put the YouTube URL in there, and it goes and scrubs it and grabs all the transcription and so forth. But that doesn't have access to the attendance and which email accounts were actually, logged in during that meeting. It's only hearing different voices, but doesn't know that's person A, person B, person C, not TiVo and Robert and Curtis. So it would be missing that metric, but at least you get the transcription into the database and you can use that as context. Right. So I'd love it if we could support multiple methods. Just the user needs to understand the level of depth of knowledge that the AI would have relates to how it was imported, how the data was imported into the database.
Yeah, okay, that is question which we kind of actually answered. And that is like when AI is used. Okay, I'm gonna add a sticky bit in. So that was considering different metadata based on how data is imported. However, my first direction was about when, let's say there is a person who now knows that his video was used for AI and he says, I no longer want it to be used, and removes his video. Is there a requirement to clean that video and all the metadata related to that from the platform database and force that deletion to all the other platforms? Or it's once it's public, or whoever made it public, even if it's illegally made public, it's out there. You cannot protect it anymore.
Oh, that's that's a tricky question right there. Because I don't I agree that would more likely be a scenario that happens and they want it removed, but we've already collected it and now it's like ingrained, all over the place. How, could we even clean that? That would be a challenge, because a lot of the benefit of what we're hoping to provide is you're taking all this large amount of data and then removing its structure for the most part, and keeping it raw data as much as possible, so that the AI model can just traverse, right, all of this data and not need to navigate a hierarchy or a folder structure, or in fact, I want the database to be a vector database. And then it has the ability to sort of navigate through. But by doing so, you're removing some of those containers that are saying, well, here's the video title and here's where it came from and the source and all that information sort of being stripped away. So if somebody said, I want this removed, how could we track that down, the source of that information down, and delete it from the database? I don't know, because we've kind of removed some of those, that container. It's not stored in the database as a video file. It's not stored in the database as here's the URL to the YouTube video. It's stored as here's the transcription, the audio, and then here's the text, and here's the timestamps, and here's all this information. But it's not, doesn't fit in that container anymore. So if somebody wanted it removed, I have no idea. How would we do that? I don't know.
Okay. Technically, then what you're describing is that the AI creates so-called Creative Commons from that point, from that data, and it's not really up to any other user to kind of remove it. Although I think there should be a mechanism how to remove stuff, and that is a standard that we allow data deletion basically. And how do we allow it? Now I'm wondering what you said. What happens if you and me prompt the same URL link and ask the same question? Does it give different answers? Does it compute all the stuff over again? Or there is like cumulative database that is sometimes somewhat keeping track of what he has already done? Like, okay, this URL gave this information before.
Good question, Steve. So, and this is just my understanding, which could be different from reality, but educated guess here is, so each time somebody queries the database for a specific question, it is going to rerun and recapture the context and all that goes into its response is from scratch. And depending on the model parameters, it can give you completely different results. I could ask the same question 3 times and get 3 different results. And that's based off of a couple of parameters that the model's configured with. You know, it's temperature and it's PTOP. And by modifying those, I'm giving the AI freedom to be creative in its response. The more freedom and creativity it has, the more likely it's going to give you a different response each time it's prompted, right? The more strict I make it, the more I can depend on getting the same response every single time. What I'm hoping to do on our dashboard is, let's say you prompt and you ask it something about, I don't know, show me everything that TiVo has participated in during these meetings. And then it tries to give you a list. I could ask the same question and it may give me a different list. However, if the result that you like, and this is conversational, so you can refine it and say, okay, well, now show me a list related to Catalyst efforts. And then so you get down to where, hey, I like this information. Then you can share it with your community. By sharing it with your community, it's capturing that output data and putting it somewhere else in a database to where the front end can now call that information and project it on the dashboard. That information is cached in a way. So now anytime somebody else can go and view that information and look at that information, and it's not a whole new AI prompt, it's basically cached data. And then by you sharing it, that contributes to your reputation. People can thumbs up, thumbs down this thing, and it builds your reputation because you're producing content essentially by prompting it, extracting valuable information, and then sharing it in the community. But then say I wanted, you know, similar information, but I want it to be different context, then I'm going to have to go through that same process, question it, maybe ask it to refine the answer, so on and so forth. And okay, I like the result, I'm going to share it and do the same thing. Now I'm building reputation on my shared content and so on and so forth. So hopefully that answered your question. It will give different answers, most likely, depending on its freedom and creativity set in the parameters. And then once you're satisfied with it, you can keep it in your own account, or you can share it in the community dashboard. And that contributes to your reputation.
Okay. I added another section to the process that after feedback loop system, which is more oriented on the AI itself, there is another step which is optional step for sharing output. So the one who uses it, and that as another reputation model for the node who is sharing.
Yeah, so it is part of that. But I'd say it almost fits in its own category, like sharing that output can happen with any of these models, technically, right? And it's almost like it's its own.
Yeah, it's not single model provides a feature or single model provides multiple features. But once this feature goes down the pipeline of process, it asks, okay, what the outputs are. And from all of these outputs, we ask how easy basically it is to implement. Can we do an API endpoint? And then once it's figured out how the feature is provided, then it's going to be executed, which then will be turned into like a feedback system, like what's the output, how valuable it is. And it is also an optional now that, and both of these are optional. Like I think the feedback loop system is optional, but also, or how to collect feedback, is that part of like sharing output is another example of how to collect feedback. But in the how you described it, it wasn't really part of feedback loop. It is somewhat, but it's more like an extra step to build reputation for the users, not for the system, but the AI or the system does use or leverage the reputation of these users who provide data outputs.
Yeah, I do kind of see it different, or like you described it. It's when people share the output, the community response to that output or feedback to that output is designed for the reputation system. Now, some of the metrics that might feed back into the feedback loop system is stuff like how many people are using this and is it being used? And so it's not necessarily that we're letting the community rate the shared output for the feedback loop system. The feedback loop system cares, are people using it? Is it getting utilized? Is it creating additional output? Okay, cool. Then the people that are creating that shared content, the shared output, they provide feedback, right, to the system and saying, okay, this was easy to use, or it didn't give me the output I liked. So they're feeding into the feedback loop system. But then the content that they're producing is being sort of shared with the community and building in the reputation system at that point, right? Just because maybe this person didn't contribute good, valuable shared output, why would that, go into the feedback loop system? It has nothing to do with the feedback loop system. It has to do with that person's ability to create content necessarily. But when they use that model, they can rate that experience with interacting with the model. That does feed into the feedback loop system, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we are on the same page here.
Perfect.
So we have process, we have data management, deleting, collecting, and structuring. Are we missing something important in order to collaborate with? No, actually it's not. But yeah, it is. To collaborate with open source DAO platforms. Or is this a good starting point to base the requirements. So in order to make it easier for different DAO platforms to integrate to each other, it's basically understanding the flow process of enabling AI models, making it as simple as possible, making sure there are feedback loops and reputation models, and the data is stored and structured, and everybody kind of has the same vision and same lessons and learnings shared between them.
I think that's quite valuable, to be honest, because if we can standardize on that, then that's sort of the vision I'm hoping for is okay, now if all these groups have the same data to start with, then they can be creative with how to use that data. But if one project is doing it one way and another project's doing it another way, there's no interoperability. So yeah, this makes sense.
So, and all this kind of assumes that the single model provides a feature is that the model is open source. Is that correct?
The model, yes, the model would be open source. Yeah.
Is the feature going to be open source, or only the access to API is available there, but
yeah, I kind of think that is part of the process, in my opinion. So the API, the API would be open source. But see, that's where there is some confusion here in understanding the implementation. So let's say we go through this process and we decide, okay, working with the public API is sufficient for this feature, then we're just using a public API. It's not our own. It's not a trained model. So what would be open sourced, right? Well, it's already open sourced. It's just an API that we're using, say OpenAI API or ChatGPT or GPT-4 or whatever. That's not our model. So there's nothing to open source other than our implementation of it, potentially. But if it goes off to the other track where we are training it and we're building our own AI model, then that would be open source, that anybody can hit that API to get the same results or response or whatever.
From top of my head, I don't think we have missing anything. And if we are, I guess it, and hopefully it will come up through more discussions when we go into details of things we're going to measure, and then, oh, we didn't think about this, or experiences when we talk about user journeys going through the sessions or the standards we are visioning and learning about the standards, or actually building a standard, and we think about all the skills people need to have in order to create a quality standard, then more stuff may come up. But for now, I would technically conclude us and say that our solution statement is creating community standards for sharing data across projects. And our problem statement is open source DAO platforms that use AI are not being integrated with each other.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Tivo.
This is it for today. Thanks for watching.